Alrighty, you nerds, I haven't ranted about weird niche Star Trek crap in quite a while, so I'm gonna share with you some weird niche Star Trek crap. One of my favorite things about Star Trek is the myriad of side stuff in the Star Trek universe, the comics, the books, the audio dramas and all that stuff. Many of you already know this about me, but the coolest elements of those sides of the Star Trek universe is that often those projects get made at specific points within the Star Trek franchise that were before we get to see future entries in the Star Trek franchise that really codified what Star Trek TM was. So for example, you'd get Star Trek books where it says in the book that there are no female Borg, which we know from Star Trek Voyager and First Contact that is definitely not true, because there are definitely female Borg. But at the time in which the book was made, during the franchise, that hadn't been solidified on screen, and so the person who wrote the book kind of went their own direction with it. I just love those weird moments of other directions that the Star Trek universe could have taken. And one of the best versions of that is the Gold Key comics. If you have not heard about the Gold Key comics, they are some of the wildest parts of the Star Trek franchise that you need to check out. These were comics that were written at the same time that the Star Trek show was coming out, that were kind of released concurrently with the show to sort of be a part of the multimedia, franchise of what Star Trek was. But back when the Gold Key comics were written in the 1960s, science fiction was at a much different place than where we think of it now, with big franchises and specific rules to the universe. And when people thought science fiction, they thought the very militaristic, Forgotten Planet, very weird and wacky style of science fiction. And the Gold Key comics, because they were written by actual writers who actually hadn't seen the series Star Trek yet, they were basing their stories in the comics off of photos that they had seen of the sets from Star Trek, but not actually watched the episodes yet, because it's yeah, we gotta pump these things out. They had wildly different ideas on what Star Trek was. So for example, the Enterprise warp engines were rocket engines, because they didn't have an idea of what warp was. Also Kirk and Spock were very antagonistic to each other at certain times. There's also strange science fiction stuff. There's a couple issues where Kirk and Spock become space pirates. And when I say space pirates, I don't mean oh, they did pirating stuff in space. No, quite literally yar har har, yo ho ho, space pirates. It's ridiculous, and some of the most fun you will ever see with Star Trek stuff. I adore it, and actually one of my dreams would be to do a Gold Key comic version of Star Trek Lower Decks at some point. If I ever got to write for Lower Decks, that would be my pitch. Gold Key alternate universe Lower Decks episode where everything's run on rocket engines and it's a 1960s style version of Star Trek. It would be fun. But the reason that I explained all of this to you is actually not for any of that, but because I wanted to point out one specific weird detail in one specific Gold Key comic that I just find wildly fascinating. In one of the comic storylines called The Legacy of Lazarus, Kirk and the crew visit a strange planet where they meet kind of wax figure recreations of famous figures throughout Earth history. So they meet Abraham Lincoln, which actually this one was written before that one episode where Lincoln did show up in an episode of Star Trek. But they also meet famous Roman emperors and stuff like that. And one person that they meet is the 45th President of the United States, and he looks like this. I don't know if you can see this right here, but I will put up a picture of it on screen so you can see it better. And keep in mind, this comic was written in the 1960s, and yet that dude looks just like Donald Trump, who was the 45th President of the United States. I'm just saying, Gold Key Comics predicted the future, and they got Trump elected. And I blame them, specifically. Whoever wrote this comic, I blame you. I blame you. You gave us this future. You gave us this future. But I just found that's just one of the wildest, strangest things, and it just stuck in my brain for all this time, that apparently the Gold Key comic predicted Donald Trump becoming president in the 1960s. So, yeah, if you want to look for other predictions of the future, read Gold Key Comics, I guess. Maybe Kirk and Spock will murder some plant life like they do in one issue. Or maybe we'll all become space pirates. I don't know. Gold Key Comics told me so. Go read them. They're a lot of fun, and they're wild and wacky. Thank you for watching this video. This is what y'all pay me to do. I don't know why, but I adore you for it. Live long and prosper, everybody.